People with nightmare siblings. What's the most screwed up thing they ever did? My brother's in prison for kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, evading arrest, attempted murder, possession of an illegal firearm, possession of a controlled substance, possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute, manufacturing a controlled substance with intent to distribute, and as a cherry on top of the pile of crap, intimate assault. Here's the truly messed up thing. The rest of the family was surprised it wasn't worse. Story 2. I was maybe 8 or 9 when this happened. For context, my dad was deployed and my mom was working, so my brother had to babysit me. My brother was around 16 at the time. As soon as my mom left, he shoved me into a closet and locked me inside for 6 or so hours. I was scared of the dark and couldn't reach the light string. He didn't let me out to use the bathroom or eat anything, so I ended up going on myself and sitting in the dark until my mom came home. She told me that he was asleep in his room when she got home. Needless to say, I really frickin' hate him. He's still an awful person, by the way. I feel like if someone is like that by the age of 16, they're most likely gonna stay that way. People can change, but someone that expressly awful doesn't just get better with age. Not at 16. Or not after 16, I should say. Story 3. He married a girl. Wedding had a lot of screw yous to our family in it. But aside from those, announced at the wedding we're pregnant. Turned out about 4 months at that point, they had the baby. 1 month later, he announces, "It's too much. She's just so annoying and I can't take this. I'm leaving and I'm gonna move in with a friend from work." Turns out friend from work is 8 months pregnant at this point with his next kid. By some miracle, he doesn't leave that girl when the baby is born, but gets her pregnant again about as soon as possible. I don't know if she wises up or something else at that point, but baby mama number 2 kicks him out. Now he lives in my parents' basement, and he refuses to drive an hour to see his kids because what good is that? One of those kids he spent their first month of life with and has seen about a dozen times since. The second, I think he spent the entire first, call it 10 months of their life together till mommy was knocked up again and hasn't been seen since. And the third child he's never seen. Story 4. Dropped a dumbbell 20 pounds, on my face while I was laying on the couch, breaking one of my front teeth and causing permanent jaw damage. Not to outdo himself, the same brother tried to stab me in the ribs with a homemade shiv, causing significant injury a few years later. And he wonders why even decades later I want nothing to do with him. Edits for additional context. The first incident occurred when he was 7, the second when he was 14. They are just the highlights of a long series of dysfunctional psychopathic behavior. He did spend time in juvie over the second incident. I've had no contact with him as an adult, and I don't know his fate during the interval. We are several years apart. That's as much context as I'm willing to share. To do something like that as a kid, a 20-pound dumbbell at the age of 7? Obviously, I'm not saying it's impossible, but that takes straight up effort. This kid was out to do some harm. I always wonder how kids end up like that, where they're just so mean and it seems like there's nothing you can do about it. Surely there is, but just what? Story 5. My brother is 5 years older than me. When he turned 12, my folks trusted him to watch me when they went out for short trips to the store, dinner, that kind of stuff. When I was about 8, I got into a terrible fight with my brother one night when he was watching me. I think it started with something stupid. I wanted to watch a movie, and he wanted the living room and TV to watch something I thought was scary. So he told me to screw off upstairs to my room. We almost always came to blows over everything. His reactions to arguments were always to get inches away from your face and scream as loud as possible and puff up to intimidate. He 100% learned this from our father. He would then put hands on you if you stepped up to him. That night, we started screaming at each other and he slapped me across the face. I was so shocked I fell on my butt and looked at him in disbelief. He'd split my lower lip, he'd hit me so hard. I started to cry and said I was going to call our grandmother who lived about 30 minutes away. This was before cell phones and I didn't think about calling my folks wherever they were. As soon as I stood to run to the phone, he grabbed me by the collar of my shirt and tried to keep me away from the phone. I screamed and tried to push him away, but he grabbed my hair with his other hand and forced me into the ground. He was behind me, his arms shifted into a bear hug, his legs wrapped around mine, and I couldn't move. I felt his arms shift and one of the forearms went around my neck and his opposite hand clasped over my mouth, and then my nose. I screamed, or tried, that I couldn't breathe. I couldn't suck in any air at all. I clawed at his arms, but I remember trying to kick my legs and they couldn't budge. We writhed like that for what felt like a long time, but I clearly remember fading out and going dark. When I woke up, I was laying on the floor and I had peed myself at some point. I remember feeling so ashamed of that later. I felt so tired and sore, but I looked up and saw my brother sitting on the couch watching his movie and completely ignoring me. He had unplugged the 2 phones we had and had them in his lap. I couldn't move for a long time, and I remember just laying there, hurting in my lungs, crying, but quietly, because when I sucked in air, my chest felt broken. He didn't even look at me, but he said if I told Mom or Dad, he would shoot me. I eventually crawled into the kitchen, walked up the stairs, slipped out of all my wet clothes, and fell into bed and to sleep. He is now 38. Beat me many times before and after that incident, before he left the house at 18, but never that bad. He is a deadbeat dad. Currently in prison for his 5th DUI and marijuana possession charge, homeless when not in prison, has never held a job for more than a few months, lies, cheats, steals, and my dad still loves him to death. I don't think I have ever loved my brother. Maybe it's my own personal views coming into the mix here, but mentioning marijuana possession with the other stuff that's happening at the end there, I feel like it just doesn't really fit. I feel like 5th DUI is a lot worse. That aside though, this truly is a nightmare sibling. Absolutely no regard for other life, it seems. OP, I'm really sorry you had to go through that. That sounds terrible. I hope that you're doing well now, at least. Story 6. My sister is a convicted child toucher who used to abuse our grandparents' foster children. She also abused me and our cousins. She convinced our dad to sign a car loan for her when she was in her early 20s because she had already trashed her credit. She never paid any of it, and he was already struggling financially. It sent into a downward spiral that ultimately ended in his death from an overdose years later, after being rendered homeless. She has always loved to date gang members, one of whom was implicated in the murder of her cousin. We share a father but have different mothers. She was subsequently caught sleeping with multiple police officers to get information on the case to keep her murdering boyfriend out of jail. In that same murder spree, 2 innocent people who had nothing to do with the gangs were executed after begging for their lives. They had just both happened to walk past at the wrong time. She still doesn't think her now ex-boyfriend should be in jail. Happily, he was convicted and won't be getting out of jail in this lifetime. She got married a few years later. A few months after the wedding on Christmas Day, she tells her new husband, who by all accounts was actually a decent guy, that she was going out for milk or something, and she never comes back. When our father was in the hospital and I was having to take him off life support, she kept telling everyone she was on her way, please wait for her. I did, for 2 days. Turned out she lied, never left her house about 8 hours away, and thought it was hilarious she made us all wait. This is on top of all of the mental and emotional abuse I suffered at her hands for years. She broke things I cared about, would keep me awake, and hit me with belts and barbecue tools if I fell asleep, for days at a time. I am pretty sure she unalived my grandparents' dog. She still posts on Facebook occasionally from what I hear. After what happened with my dad, I sent her a message that I hoped she died alone, and blocked her on everything. She is a monster. For some reason, when entering this thread, I did not expect such nightmare siblings. Like, it's literally what the question asks, but these are bad, like straight up psychopathic. I can't even begin to imagine what she was thinking during the whole life support thing. She thought it was funny? It's just such a weird, blatant disregard for other people that I can't even begin to understand. And honestly, I hope I never really do, because to understand a mind like that, I would also have to be pretty messed up myself. Story 7. My brothers, half-brothers, they have the same father but I have a different father, are a bit older than me. One day they were both sitting on our dock fishing. The oldest brother picked up a knife out of the tackle box. They were about 12. It was a brand new knife of some kind specifically for fish or something. He looks at my other brother and goes, I wonder how sharp this knife is. And without hesitation, literally stabbed it into the top of the middle brother's thigh. Totally casual about it, like no big deal. The knife was deep enough to stand upright by itself. Story 8. I've got nothing on some folks here, but she poisoned my cat, threw out all my food while I was selling my belongings on eBay to pay rent because I was too fat, and would use my things without asking, sometimes using all of my consumables and then saying to my wife, "Don't worry, he's got money." I really don't think she understood I was literally recycling bottles and cans to make rent, and she would steal the bill money I was saving for phone, internet rent without a second thought, and claim to our landlord I never paid her. The poisoning ended up being the last straw, and we had to put him in an oxygen tent and needed to have his stomach pumped, etc. When it was all said and done, we were out of all of our savings. We had recently started the home purchasing process and needed the cash to close. Instead, we couldn't afford closing costs, and we ended up forfeiting all the money we had to put into the process before that point, and had to deal with the broker wanting to sue us. So now I make it a point to never announce my visits to family. She's an hour plus away from most of them, just so she doesn't have time to show up. If I see her car parked at the relative's house I'm visiting, I will just drive away rather than risk engaging with her again. Story 9. Used my own child to hurt me. My parents would babysit my young son while I was working, and my older adult brother was there. He had always hated me and did everything in his power to hurt me because I was the baby of the family. My son was around 5, 6 at the time, and I caught him verbally impressing onto my child ideas of weird kinks. like he was trying to corrupt him mentally to hurt me. Removed him from the situation as soon as I figured out what he was doing. I hate my brother. He's always done mean things to me my whole life. I swear he's a sociopath. Story 10. Much older siblings here, specifically talking about my oldest brother. I was about 12 and parents were pretty deep in poverty, but he had serious wealth in the insurance industry. He offered to buy us a manufactured home, no strings attached. We accept, pick it out, move in, etc. Then he says, okay, your rent is this much. High rent for the area and something you would not move on to as a low-income family. Since we're already moved in and he holds the deed, we desperately scrape the barrel making the rent. When we can't do it anymore, he puts the house up for sale. I'm 18 at this point, so parents move out of state to something they can afford and I'm left homeless. I'm good now though at 28. Bro has made a lot of good changes in his life, but I don't think I can ever forgive this. There is something so evil about this one. Like, there had to be planning and an intentional level of deceit here on your own family. The worst part is, I bet the older brother at the time thought that it was a favor that he was doing. I mean, it is really common for people with money to not understand that sometimes people don't even have enough money to live, so he probably thought he was just doing a great thing. Either that, or he really was just evil. Story 11. This wasn't a screwed up thing that my brother did to me personally, but I think it's worth mentioning. He and his now ex-girlfriend had a super toxic relationship. I don't know the whole story, as I was never close with her, and I don't trust my brother's account of things. But there was something my brother did once that made me decide, oh, he's not just a jerk in a toxic relationship, he's a manipulative abuser. He had his friend text him pretending to be the girlfriend's best friend. They orchestrated this whole story in which the best friend came onto my brother, but he turned her down because he's loyal to his girl. He even went as far as to save his friend's contact info as the best friend's phone number. When he showed his girlfriend the texts, it obviously looked like her best friend had sent them. She ultimately believed my brother over her best friend because the phone number doesn't lie. Also, my brother is a fantastic liar, so that helped. Anyway, they've been broken up for years now, and the ex-girlfriend and best friend still hate each other. They had been friends since they were 7. I haven't spoken to him since he stole money from me to buy weed, and denied it until I threatened to file a police report. Last I heard, he's in a happy relationship. I wish that girl luck. As someone who is proudly not an abuser, hearing about stuff like this in relationships is crazy to me. How could you ever say that you love someone or even care about them and do stuff like this? That last one, there was some plausible deniability, like, oh, maybe he was doing a good thing. This one? Nuh-uh. This guy has no defense. Trash behavior. No one deserves to be treated like that in a relationship at all. Story 12. He pushed me into the sliding glass door because I didn't know if the phone had rung or not. After about 5 minutes of him yelling about the phone, I snapped and just said, just leave me the frick alone. His response was to shove me, cracked the glass and everything. For reference, I was 12 and he was 23. Story 13. If I loved a toy, my older sister would purposefully break it in some way. I had a Teddy Ruxpin and I loved it so much, so she broke his mouth off. I loved porcelain dolls. She broke all of their hands or feet off. I loved Barbies. She cut the hair or nose off and broke a leg off. If I liked a stuffed animal, she would tear the eye off or its tail. When we got older, she would take my makeup and just mush the lipstick on my desk or snap the eyeliner so it cracked and couldn't be sharpened. Or just tap the friggin' eyeshadow upside down on my desk so it broke. I loved drawing and painting, so she would just take a Sharpie and hold it on the friggin' paper until it bled through every page. She didn't accidentally do this stuff either. She's 2 years older than me and she would just casually walk in, break stuff and then walk out like nothing happened. When I got old enough to like boys, she would ask me who I liked, and then tell me that boy liked her. Even if she didn't know the boy at all, she would just say that he liked her. Later, that advanced to her giving head to basically any guy I liked or she thought I liked. She once gave a handy to a guy in my science class simply because we were paired up for a project, and she saw him being nice to me. I used to get my feelings hurt until I smartened up enough to tell her I liked my friend at the time's older brother, Derek. Derek was 19, and had a prescription for Voltrax. For those who don't know, because I didn't and had to look it up, the drug mentioned at the end, I don't know how to say it properly, so I'm not going to try again, is typically used to treat stuff like herpes. So basically, OP just, I don't know, it's some kind of karmic justice that OP instilled. Really though, I don't know how someone's brain tells them to do stuff like this. Oh, this person really likes this thing? Regardless of like sibling or not, just any person. Oh, I better ruin it for them. That's nuts to me. Story 14. It's a toss-up really between three things my brother has done. A. Found out my brother and his wife were not separated and getting a divorce. Something he'd been telling the whole family for over a year, and she knew nothing about until I inadvertently said something to her. B. Him posting on Facebook that my mother had passed away just to get sympathy likes. She was sick but not dead yet, and I had to wake up and handle the massive freakout from relatives and friends. He then claimed he didn't know it would be taken that way, even though people were sending him public condolences and talking about her in the past tense. C. Got confirmation from someone who knows him really well that he lied about having cancer at one point. Again, pretty sure that was for the sympathy and likes. There's a lot more, and enough for a crap show times 10. But those are just the biggest three that impacted me and or I can't forgive him for. He also lied about having hurt his back, so he couldn't come to our mother's funeral. Only 2 weeks later, he posted photos of himself online holding his contractor's license, bragging about the jobs he was doing. He's never answered me when I asked what miracle operation or treatment he got to cure his bad back, and he hasn't spoken to me since that day. Nothing of value has been lost. Story 15. When I was maybe 6 or 7, my older sister, she was around 12 or 13 at the time, decided one day she wanted to see what the inside of a turtle's shell looked like. She had found a turtle in the backyard and took it up to our dad's shed, where he had a little concrete slab in front of the doors of the shed. She started slamming the turtle down on the concrete until she cracked his shell open several times. Blood was everywhere. It died, of course. I can remember this being my very first traumatic memory I have of my childhood. She told me she would unalive me if I told our parents. I just recently told them, and I'm now 31. I have no relationship with her at this point in my life, and she needs a lot of help mentally, but refuses treatment. Story 16. She tried to wreck the car with me and my other sisters in it. I was 8 or 9. Toxic sister was 24. Took off yelling, "Let's frickin' wreck tonight, girls!" because her ex-boyfriend wouldn't take her back. We were in his neighborhood. We were screaming. He came running to the stop sign, made her turn around, and snatched me and not crazy sis out the car. Called our parents to come get us and wouldn't let her near us. Coke and being some kind of narcissistic borderline psycho don't mix well, kids. When I grew up, she wound up screwing my ex. Now she lives with a boyfriend who isolates her and treats her like crap. Most of her teeth have fallen out from pills and other drugs, too. I moved 2,000 miles away. Funny how that worked out. Look, I get being broken up about an ex. Wanting to harm anyone else about it, let alone your own siblings, and potentially just unalive them, gotta say, hasn't crossed my mind ever. I'm glad the ex-boyfriend seemed to have some sense in him. Probably why he was the ex, huh? Anyway, these truly were some nightmarish siblings. If you have any stories of your own, I'm sure you'll drop them in the comments and I'll give them a read. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.